From the Matrix Home Solutions studios, this is Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560, The Answer.
Listen to AM 560 The Answer online at 560theanswer.com, on the AM 560 mobile app, on your Alexa-powered smart speaker, and on TuneIn, iHeart, and on Odyssey. This is Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft and Amy Jacobson on AM 560 The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. No surprise that some of the budding young Reds at Arizona State University don't want to let Kyle Rittenhouse live that quiet life outside of public view that he told Tucker Carlson he wanted to live, focus on his studies, maybe become a nurse, maybe study the law.
Well, he's doing online classes right now, and they're appalled at that, so they want him evicted from the school. They want him expelled just because he's Kyle Rittenhouse. And I don't think they know what the law is. He was found not guilty by jurors, and that's what stands in the state and the country.
They know what the law is, but it's a flawed justice system. He's a murderer. Murderer Kyle Rittenhouse is how the Students for Socialism on the campus of Arizona State University and other such affiliated socialists are characterizing Kyle Rittenhouse and calling for the university to withdraw him from the university. And then those young kids,
what else do they want?
Young Reds at Arizona State, they'll grow up to be Chiron writers over at CNN, where they'll tweet things like, over the weekend, Waukesha will hold a moment of silence today, marking 1 week since a car drove through a city Christmas parade, killing 6 people and injuring scores of others. Was that Christine?
What?
Was that Kit from Knight Rider that drove through that parade in Waukesha? A car drove through a city Christmas parade. Huh.
How about a pre-planned attack, or even just say a murderer? A crazed man used his vehicle as a weapon and killed 6 people. But no.
That's not how those Arizona State socialists who go to work for CNN see it. For more on the topic, pleased to be joined by John Lott, president of the Crime Prevention Research Center, former senior advisor for research and stats at the U.S. Department of Justice's Office of Legal Policy, and author of Gun Control Myths, as well as More Guns, Less Crime. John Lott, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Well, it's good to talk to you again. Thanks for having me on.
So one of the topics coming out of the Kyle Rittenhouse trial and his acquittal is certainly about guns and, the age and the rifle and the usual things. But it's also interesting that the left feels emboldened to talk about how we need to rethink self-defense laws in this country. They now want to go after stand your ground laws, which exist in a majority of the states.
Yeah, well, the interesting thing to me about the stand your ground laws is that they're most frequently used by minorities who live in poor, high-crime areas, because they're the ones who are most likely victims of violent crime. As with so many different types of actions the Democrats take with regard to guns, they end up doing things that make it more difficult for the people who actually benefit the most from having the option to be able to go and defend themselves to be able to go and do so. The things that they do to make it more costly, more difficult. I mean, in Illinois, the state that claims that it cares about minorities, because you Democrats running everything, it costs $400 to go through the process to get a concealed handgun permit. You compare Illinois to Indiana. Illinois only has about 4% of the adult population with a concealed handgun permit. Neighboring Indiana has over 21% with it. And there's a simple reason for that. In Illinois, it's very costly to get it. In Indiana, it's $12.95 to be able to go and get a permit. Up until very recently, Chicago made it so that there wasn't even a training facility in the city. They banned it on public transportation, even if you had a permit. And so if you're a poor black who lives in Chicago, even if you could afford the $400, if you didn't have a car, you'd have to go and borrow a car on multiple days, either 2 or 4 days, to travel way outside the city in order to get the training necessary for the 16 hours to get the permit. And you look at who gets permits in those places. In Illinois, it's primarily wealthy white who live in the suburbs. In Indiana, you see many more permits given to people who live in zip codes which are relatively poor and are minority.
Well, and speaking of Chicago and crime and being able to protect yourself from predators that exist, as well as those who we had a chance to cage and decided to turn back out on the streets, as we like to do in Chicago and other towns like Philadelphia. So Chicago has more people shot this year than they did last year, and we were up north of 50% of both shootings and murders last year. 4,233 total shot this year, 787 homicides. We'll pass last year's total of homicides too, so it'll be up again year over year. Philadelphia just set a record.
What?
With its 501st murder. That's a record that dates back to 1990 in Philadelphia. And interesting thing that they have in common, a lot of things in common, Democrat socialist dominated, but also the prosecutors, Larry Krasner and Kim Fox,
Right.
are cut from the same cloth. They're two Soros-funded non-prosecution prosecutors.
Exactly. No, it's ridiculous. I mean, it's not rocket science that we're talking about here. When you have an arrest rate for murders in Chicago that's like 20%, when you have even the one, and that's on average, gang murders are solved at a lower rate than on average. So a gang murder is even less likely than that to be arrested. And then you have the DA there refusing to prosecute many people. You just had a case, I guess it was about a month ago, where you had two rival drug gangs fighting it out in daylight, caught on video there, high-definition video. You had police witnessing it. You had one person killed and 3 people wounded. And the district attorney refused to file charges against the perpetrators there. First of all, I mean, one statement from the district attorney's office there was that, well, it was mutually agreed to combat.
We have that here.
Yeah, right.
Mutual combatants. I mean, it's crazy.
Yeah.
There was a video of a kid from Schaumburg killing a kid from Palatine, and Kim Fox didn't prosecute him because, no, they agreed to have a fight. Well, no, one brought a gun and one had a knife. So guess who won?
Well, we handle it. We handle it in Chicago, a place like Philadelphia. It's like sport. It's like the Coliseum. That's how we do crime control here.
Well, people want to go and blame it on lots of other things, but to me it's very simple, that if you make it so it's not risky for criminals to go and commit crime, they're going to commit a lot more crime. And, you have to get rid of a lot of the politically correct restrictions you have on policing there. The forms and other things that police have to spend their time filling out whenever they go and talk to people is just crazy. I mean, that's a rule, for example, that Rahm Emanuel had put in place when he made an agreement with the ACLU. And, it's, and I guess this last year they cut like 400 positions from the police department. At the same time, I guess they spent millions of dollars protecting Lori Lightfoot and stuff. It's just crazy things that are going on, and the thing is, Democrats claim that they care about poor, that they care about minorities, but who do they think are overwhelmingly the victims of these crimes that are occurring, that they're not deterring? And it's not just the direct victims there. The businesses, of course, now you're having even businesses in very nice areas in Chicago being destroyed. But, who do they think primarily works in those areas? Who owns a lot of those companies? Who owns houses and property in those areas that are being reduced in value because of the crime? It's overwhelmingly poor minorities that are being harmed.
Well, it's clearly not registering a commentary you did for RealClearPolitics.com, looking at some polling on attitudes towards protecting oneself, towards being able to lawfully own a gun and protect yourself as needed. Support for gun control dropping overall, but it's up among those Democrat socialists, so they're incorrigible.
Yeah, we've seen there are several polls that have come out recently by Gallup, Quinnipiac, Rasmussen, and they all show a similar pattern. Gallup and Quinnipiac show about a 15 percentage point drop in support for gun control over the last 5 years, driven primarily by independents moving against stricter gun control. You'd think that Democrats might rethink their position, but support among Democrats has soared. 91% of Democrats in both the Gallup and the Quinnipiac poll support even stricter gun control laws. In the Quinnipiac poll, by contrast, only 13% of Republicans support stricter gun control. Those are the largest partisan gaps on the issue. And, Democrats often will claim that they support reasonable or common sense gun control laws. If you look at some of the issues that are brought up in these polls, Gallup, for example, asks, do you support a complete ban on handguns for civilians? 40% of Democrats support a complete ban on civilians owning handguns. Only 6% of Republicans do. You have 80% of Democrats support a ban on semi-automatic rifles. I mean, it's just, I'm not even sure whether or not they understand some of the terms that are being used there, but
it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if they understand it or not. You know what their disposition is, and by the way, too, who's driving that party, and it's that 40%. That's where the momentum is in that party.
Right. Well, it's going to be hard for Democratic politicians to move away from their strident rhetoric. I guess I've become convinced over time that the goal of these gun control pushes that they're making is really just to get rid of all the guns that are there, despite their claims about reasonable or common sense type rules. Just look at some of the things that the Biden administration's been pushing. The person that they've nominated to be controller of the currency wants to have what she calls debanking, which those parts of industries which she claims are socially suboptimal industries, which include things like the oil industry as well as firearms makers and sellers. She wants to force financial institutions not to do business with them. Try running a company if you can't get somebody to handle the credit cards for your customers or provide lines of credit or check cashing or other things that financial institutions do. Biden keeps on talking about the zero tolerance policy that he wants to have for rogue gun dealers. Nobody wants gun dealers secretly selling guns out of the back of their stores to criminals, but that's not what is being gone after here. That's not what the zero tolerance thing's doing.
Well, the thing
that you make.
Yeah, the thing too about it is, they want to get rid of guns. They want to get rid of guns like they want to get rid of COVID. It's an impossibility, and I think they know that. So there's an ulterior motive here. Obviously, it's straight partisan politics based on those numbers in terms of the base of that party. But it's also ultimately comes down to control, and you have these crime-ridden neighborhoods where, as you were rightly pointing out, disproportionately the poor and disproportionately minority are most heavily negatively impacted. And yet, what is their consequence? They dominate, Democrat socialists dominate the public offices in every major city in the country. So why not keep it up? Why not double down?
Well, it makes people even more dependent upon the local politicians there if they have no option to go and defend themselves.
Exactly. He is John Lott, president of the Crime Prevention Research Center, former senior advisor for research and stats at the U.S. Department of Justice's Office of Legal Policy, the author of books including Gun Control Myths and More Guns, Less Crime. John, thanks as always for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
This is the morning show more Chicago radio listeners are choosing. This is Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560. The Answer.
Amy Jacobson and Dan Proft here, and we want to tell you about an opportunity for you to promote your business and to make a difference this Christmas season.
We're talking about our Food for the Poor Business Benefactor Program. We've partnered with Food for the Poor to provide life-saving food for thousands